Take a look at these two footballers. One scored 125 goals and provided 141 assists through 689 matches, while the other scored 312 goals and provided 49 assists in 550 matches. That equals to 0.39 and 0.66 goal contributions per game, respectively. And bear in mind that both players played essentially the same position as attacking midfielders. The player on the left has 1 Ballon d'Ors and the one on the right has 3. So now I ask you, which player do you think is better? The player on the left is Zinedine Zidane, and the other is fellow French countryman Michel Platini. Looking at stats alone, I'm sure most people would say that Michel Platini had more impressive numbers between the two. But I know, it's not fair to compare both players with stats alone. Truly, they were both some of the greatest ever to grace the pitch, and they both impacted the game in their own way. But when I came across this poll on YouTube asking who the best French footballer was, I was utterly shocked to see that Michel Platini had gotten such little votes. Then it dawned on me. It might be because people either forgot or simply just don't know how incredibly good he was. But well, it's probably because he also played in the 70s and 80s. And well, it's kind of funny how many of France's greatest footballers had parents that weren't even from France. Because like Zidane's parents are from Algeria, Platini's parents immigrated to France from Italy. And looking at his career in hindsight now, you would have never guessed that he began his football journey outside the limelight, playing for a club that has for many years now been away from Division I French competition, AS Nancy. But back in the 70s, however, except for a single year, they would mainly be a mid-table Ligue 1 team at best. Yeah, pretty underwhelming origins for a player of Platini's greatness. But bear in mind, AS Nancy was keeping afloat simply from Platini's talent alone, as there was a single season in which Platini would break his left arm in a match against Nice, basically putting him out for the entire season. And the result was his club getting absolutely destroyed on a weekly basis and ultimately getting relegated. But it was after healing from those injuries that a flip switched inside Platini, turning him into one of the best footballers in the world. He would go from scoring 2 goals a season in his first 2 seasons for his club to absolutely carrying them all the way back to Ligue 1, finishing on top of the French second division and earning promotion by scoring 30 goals and making a name for himself as one of the best free kick takers of his era. Because while he was injured, he had nothing to do but set up dummies on the pitch and consistently practicing sending his set pieces over the wall and into the back of the net. During all this time, not only with Platini, but in the entire club's history, they had yet to win any form of silverware in Division I play. But that would all change when Platini would bring his mid-table club their only piece of Ligue 1 silverware for decades to come, carrying them all the way to the Coup de France final, where he would face off against the very same club that he had broken his arm against, Nice. And it's only fitting that Platini scored the only goal in the final, helping his club lift the trophy. But like the story with his longtime first club, Nancy, perhaps one of the biggest downsides to the career of Platini was his lack of silverware. Because despite scoring 123 goals in 185 matches, as good as he was, Nancy could just never win anything else in Ligue 1. So after 7 long years with the club, Platini found that it was time to say goodbye to the boyhood club that gave him a chance and move over to Saint-Étienne. Platini was expected to once more help the club make it back to the European Cup or modern-day Champions League final. But despite being the top scorer for the club in his first season, with 26 goals in 47 matches, they would be eliminated in both the Coup de France and UEFA Cup during the quarterfinals, as well as only finishing 3rd in Ligue 1. But regardless of the disappointments and the weaker squad, Platini was still expected to carry. At an individual level, fans could not deny his pure talent and ability. Compared to Zidane, sure, he wasn't as active of a playmaker, but when it came to scoring goals, Platini was undoubtedly better. But that doesn't mean that Platini was a bad passer. Far from it. He was one of the best passers in the world, but a majority of them were usually in build-up play for the attack, and thus his actual assist numbers would never be too amazing. Still, Platini knew how to advance the ball and was incredibly creative in the way he did so. Plus the fact that he was extremely confident with both feet only made him a much bigger attacking threat. In front of goal, he was an incredibly cool and calm finisher, putting the ball in the back of the net as efficiently as possible, even if it wasn't exactly the prettiest looking shot. But his dribbling made absolute fools of defenders all throughout Europe. I mean, you can see for yourself just how hopeless some of these defenders look. And I know some of you will joke around saying that they were farmers or part-time footballers or whatever, but hey, talent scales with its generation. Platini was just so much better than his opposition. And I don't think I need to remind you of just how lethal of a set-piece taker he was. He was one of the most consistent and accurate set-piece takers of his generation, inspiring countless footballers after him to start focusing and training more on different set-piece situations. Then in his second season for Saint-Étienne, Platini would only continue to play incredibly, going on to score 32 goals in 52 appearances, and he would help his club reach all the way to the Coupe de France final. They would, however, unfortunately finish as runner-ups, and once more in the UEFA Cup, they would be eliminated in the quarterfinal. But the one saving grace would be the fact that his individual performance would bring Saint-Étienne to finish at the top of the Ligue 1 table as French champions. But despite how good he was on an individual level, he was starting to get a reputation as someone who wasn't all that great in leading his squad. As in his third and final season with Saint-Étienne, he would once more help his team reach the Coupe de France final, but again ultimately lose, as well as finishing second place in Ligue 1, failing to keep a hold on the league title. Even despite once more putting on a phenomenal season of 27 goals in 46 appearances. Even for his country in the 1978 World Cup, while he himself did do well, overall France's performance were lackluster, and thus the blame would naturally fall onto their best player. Sure, everyone knew how good he was at dribbling, passing, and scoring goals, but his reputation as someone who didn't know how to lead their team was steadily growing. However, one club decided that they could build a squad around him and really make the most of his talents. A squad that would contend much better than AS Nancy or Saint-Étienne ever could with the pieces they had around him. And that club was Juventus. Immediately, Platini would continue doing what he did at best. It was around this time that he really stepped up not only as a goal scorer, but also as a playmaker. He would go on to score 28 goals and have 14 assists in 48 appearances. But still, Italian fans had extremely high expectations for Platini. They didn't care about how good he was on an individual level. They wanted him to win the club trophies. And after going on a losing streak in Serie A, he was criticized so much by fans that he seriously contemplated leaving Italy altogether. Juventus had only managed to finish second place in the league, and he was even a big factor in helping the club reach the European Cup, scoring 5 goals in the tournament and being the second highest scorer. But still, they would lose 1-0 to Hamburg in a huge disappointment. However, there was one saving moment for him, despite the rough first season in what was then the toughest league in the world, as towards the end of the season, Juventus were down 2-0 in the Coppa Italia final versus Verona. However, Platini would equalize in the 81st minute of the match, keeping Juventus alive long enough to send them to extra time, where in the 119th minute, Platini would score the game-winning goal in miraculous fashion, winning him his first piece of silverware in Italy and softening the hearts of his critics with an insanely clutch performance. And from this moment, Platini would begin to reach his absolute peak. The following season, Platini would score 15 goals in 16 consecutive matches towards the end of 1983, winning him his first Ballon d'Or, as Juventus were dominating Serie A, eventually leading up to his first Serie A title. But even more importantly, he would also help them secure international silverware, beating Manchester United, PSG, and FC Porto to lift the European Cup Winners' Cup, as Platini would finish the season with 25 goals and 7 assists in 43 appearances, while also bringing Juve 2 major pieces of silverware. But what would be even more amazing is that same summer, Platini would put on one of the greatest major international tournament performances of all time in the 1984 Euros. In the opening match, he would score a game-winning goal against Denmark. Then in the second group stage match, he would score a hat-trick against Belgium. Then in the third group stage match, he would score another much-needed hat-trick in a narrow 3-2 win against Yugoslavia. And in the semi-final, Platini would once again score an insane game winner in the 119th minute, narrowly escaping defeat and beating Portugal 3-2 to send them to the final. Then he would cap off this incredible run with an opening goal against Spain in the final to eventually beat them 2-0 and lift the European trophy for France. Platini would score an insane 9 goals as a tournament's leading goal scorer, a record that still stands today as the most scored in a single tournament. This insane year for both club and country would earn Platini his second consecutive Ballon d'Or. But it only got even better. He would have probably the best season of his career. Once more, he would help bring Juventus to another European Cup final, with a chance to redeem himself in club football's biggest stage. And in the final against Liverpool, the only goal that was scored was, of course, by none other than Michel Platini, as not only did he finally lift the European Cup trophy, but he was also the tournament's top scorer with 7 goals, ending the season with 29 goals and 13 assists in 47 matches. And by the end of the year, Platini would lift his 3rd Ballon d'Or, becoming the 2nd out of 5 footballers in history to win the award 3 different times. And despite winning 9 trophies in his career, Platini's career was still kind of stained, with 2 Coupe de France final losses and an additional European Cup final loss, as well as finishing 2nd place in his league several times. But still, there were 2 other incidents that really stained his career, as Platini would be highly criticized, as the day he lifted his only European Cup, there was an incident between Liverpool and Juve fans, known as the Hazel Stadium disaster, leading to over 600 plus injuries and 39 people deceased. And well, following his retirement, he was involved in the infamous 2015 FIFA corruption case, involving money laundering, racketeering, and so much more, only putting a bigger asterisk on his legacy as a footballer and a person who might have been a little corrupt. Honestly, if you ask me who the greatest French footballer of all time was, I'd probably have to say Zinedine Zidane. Honestly, no matter who you think was better, just know that between the two, the other is much closer than you think.